If it's Tuesday at 2 o'clock, it's time for WorthPoint Chats with Harry Rinker. Today is April 26, 2016. And Harry, where are you today?
Well, I'm in Kentwood, Michigan today. We took a week off last week, as you may remember. I went over to Germany for two reasons, actually. First of all, my friend Hans Martin Hertlein's, who is like a brother to me, actually, his grandchildren, twin grandchildren, Lawrence and Merritt, were confirmed. And so I had an interesting opportunity to see a confirmation ceremony over in Germany. And then, unfortunately, his sister's husband, Eric Fleischman, who was also a great personal friend, passed away. And so went to a funeral service as well. But one of the fun things for me in going to Germany, Greg, is the fact that I get to stay in people's houses. I mean, I don't stay in hotels over there. I've got actually kind of a rather large extended family. As I said, Hans Martin is not my blood brother, but he's my brother. And so between his sisters and his children, his sisters' children and their grandchildren, I mean, you get older, it gets pretty deep after a while. Why I have a whole extended family over in Germany that's just fabulous for me to go over there. So we can talk about some of the things I saw there while I was there. I saw some old furniture and some other quote-unquote antiques, more or less. Very interesting thing about Germany, actually, is the fact that you don't have the traditional antique markets. Now, the tragedy was, always a tragedy when I'm concerned, is that these events were Saturday, and they have what they call antique marks and flow marks. Now, an antique mark is largely a market of antiques, like an antique show, equivalent to our antique shows. And a flow mark is equivalent to our swap meets, but with some antiques in them. And of course, they were all scheduled when I was attending all these events. But I did get to visit some friends. Hans Martin's daughter, Anya, lives on a farm out in the Westerwald, in a little town called Ziegenhain. And they like old furniture. And so I got to see some late 19th, early 20th century German furniture, Biedermeier furniture, generic stuff, equivalent to what we would see with a generic oak around the beginning of the 20th century. But it was fun to see the different German styles and that type of stuff. Also, you know, the Germans are not as into antiques as the Americans is. Although my friend Hans Martin, if you just cleaned out his living room, you'd be good, because it was done in the 1960s, and he hasn't bought anything new since then. He's not particularly doesn't spend a lot of money, and so as a result, why he's got this wonderful modernist whole wall full of cabinets. I mean, man, if it was at a modernist show, it'd be $1,500 to $2,000 worth of cabinets. So it was kind of fun to see it.
Well, anyway, it sounds like you had a good trip there. Well,
I had a good trip. You know, I haven't had a lot of trouble coming back, getting used to the time shifts on the way back. Over was not a problem, but back has been tough for me. I guess maybe some case because I'm older, and also because it's just different coming back from those 6-hour time zone differences. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about this week. A lot of things going on in the antique trade, and got some objects to look at. We've had some communication, by the way, from our members, right?
That's right. We have actually the two items that we're going to look at today were sent in through our email, and we'll put that screen up right now. So if you're watching and you'd like to have Harry look at an item of yours, you can send it to community@worthpoint.com. Send along photographs and everything that you know about the item, and we'll do our very best to give it a go. Right, Harry?
Absolutely. And also, Greg, we have to remind our viewers, those that are listening to us live, there is a chat section on your live thing, and I've got it open. So if you have a question as we're going along, just type it into the chat section, and Greg and I will see it. And if we have an opportunity, we'll deal with that as well. Interesting story in the news here this week. I came home and found the April 25th edition of Antique Week, and Hager Pottery is coming to an end after 145 years. It's been a very fascinating thing for me in the antiques and collectibles trade to watch the end of many of the great American ceramic companies, glass companies, and so forth. It's not that it didn't start long before my time. I mean, the 1930 Depression had a real problem and so forth. But but it just seems like starting in the 60s and 70s, many of the American glass manufacturers and a lot of the ceramic manufacturers went by the wayside. It's not unimportant to know about these stories because the question becomes always what's happened to the molds. Now, you know, if you're into industry, it's the mold that's used to make something that's the most expensive thing that they have to do. And so when companies go out of business, molds get passed around. I mean, when U.S. Pattern Glass and other pattern glass companies, molds were acquired. When Heisey went out of business, the Heisey molds were sold. A lot of them wound up, unfortunately, in Europe. That was same is true of many things. Now with Hager, Hager is a sad case. I mean, it was one of our last great decorative ceramic mass production potteries in the United States. It was around for 145 years. I mean, we're not talking about yesterday here. We're talking about 145 years, and it went out of business for the same reason that almost all the other ones went out of business, and that is foreign competition. Now, there's another reason too, and clearly the president of the company said the current economic climate and foreign competition has decimated our artware and decorative accessory business. Now, let's talk about that. Part of the thing is that as decorative trends change in homes and so forth, people don't tend to use decorative pottery and accessories the way they did in the 50s and 60s. I mean, you know, take the head vase. You know what head vases are, right? Those are those vases that look like heads, right?
Yes.
Well, you know, there were all kinds of tchotchkes like that in the 50s and 60s, largely from a lot of the California potteries and so forth that were around the house. You go into a young person's home today, and it's very spare. It's not loaded with a lot of stuff. And most of the stuff is straight out of Pottery Barn or Crate and Barrel, if you get at IKEA and those kind of things. And the older pieces don't fit in. People don't accessorize their home the way they did. So, you know, he could talk about, yes, there's an economic climate, but, and I'm sure he's suffering some of this, Hager was suffering some of the same things that we do in the antiques and collectibles trade. One of the things that we talk about in the antiques and collectibles trade is discretionary income. I mean, we work on people's discretionary income. They buy our stuff with money. And in the old days, we weren't challenged, but today, vacations, going to movies, all that is discretionary income too. And people are more willing to do that, maybe play leisure sports, go to the gym, buy in at a gym than they are to do all this. But anyway, it's very sad. I guess the next big question we're all going to be asking is, A, what is going to happen to the Hager molds? Now, I have to say, for people who are not aware of Hager, Hager was one of these potteries that did a lot of domestic decorative pottery. You think of that big black lion or puma that was there. Some of those really crazy lamps from the 1960s that were on top of television, TV lamps, you know, a lot of that type of stuff. Here, oh, there you go. Look at that. Yeah, there you go. They're very typical Hager pieces that you have in there. Well, these pieces today, when you look at them, they're slick and well designed. You'll go to a modernist show and you'll see that stuff, you know, high end stuff, and sometimes with fairly strong prices on it. I would say the bull would be well above $100 in the current market. Now you scroll down there, you've got some from 50, but there was always a strong sense of design element in Hager product, and so, you know, we're going to miss this company. We're going to miss this company badly. Now, it did a lot of utilitarian stuff, too. And there are a lot of reference books out there, and there are a lot of collectors for it. Now, let's just talk very quickly about the concerns right now. The first one is, what is going to happen to all these molds? Because they're not going to get taken out to a dump, which means somebody's going to buy them. And the big concern is they're going to get bought by people abroad and taken abroad, and this stuff is going to get heavily reproduced in a hurry, right out of the period molds. You won't be able to tell that the piece isn't right. You'll see it. You'll see it right out of the period molds, right size. The big thing is, can they match the glazes? Let's hope not. But the other thing is too that we're going to see a bounce in Hager stuff right now in the secondary market. People hear about the closing and they say, "Oh my gosh, we better start buying that stuff now." And so I would suspect for the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see some strong prices for Hager stuff before the market stabilizes again and we get back to this. But I mean, that's big news, and I'm very sorry to hear it. I remember, well, I mean, the two big losses, we've had another big loss not so long ago, maybe a few years ago now, was Fenton Glass. You know, Fenton doesn't produce glass, the Fenton company went into bankruptcy, and it produces some glass, but under contract for others, but not nearly what it did. And of course, our last great crystal glass maker, Lennox, went out and moved overseas a number of years ago. So, disturbing news, because the question becomes, what's left of it? If we were collecting stuff made in America, we may have a little more trouble. But anyway, Hager is worth a look at. Did some highly creative stuff, and I'm very sorry to see it close. We got a couple of letters in from the WorthPoint community, and I'd like to talk about the first one. Someone sent me a picture of a Miro print, Joan Miro print, called "Dragonfly with Red Tipped Wing in Pursuit of a Serpent Spiraling Across a Comet." Do you have that one?
Yeah, I've got it. Hold on.
Hang on, he's looking for it there.
I've got it.
And the question and here it is, and we'll actually read the letter. We'll read the letter that came with this. It says, "I picked this up at a local estate sale. It belonged to a college art professor. I don't know how to determine if it's an inexpensive print or if it could be a lithograph. Is there some way for someone who's not an expert to make this determination? I love the piece." And she said the title is "Dragonfly with Red Tipped Wing in Pursuit of a Serpent Spiraling Across a Comet." You got to wonder if he was smoking a little when he made that title up. But anyway, when comparing it to other examples of the same print, mine seems to be not as brilliantly colored as the others. If it is a lithograph, the value might be more, but would the value be greatly reduced if it's faded? So let's deal with all those questions that she asked about this print. First of all, the thought, and by the way, I might point out that this summer, at the Institute for Study of Antiques and Collectibles in July, we are doing a 2-day course called Painting, Watercolor, and Print. And essentially, it's a whole 2 days spent on how to deal with painting, how to identify paintings, how to research them, and it's paintings, watercolors, and prints. It's 2 days based on how to identify them. How do you know what you've got? How do you know if you have a later copy, what it is that you have? But here you can see, you can go to my website, harryrinker.com. But the second seminar in that 3-day series is one on paintings, watercolors, and prints, and it's important. Now let's go back to the drawing. The question is, what's a lithograph? Well, a lithograph is one color layered on top of another. In other words, think of it as a series of silk screens, and you put a silk screen down, and then you lay another color on top of it, you lay another color on top of that. And depending on the quality of the colors and the inks used, you can get enormous kinds of shading in all of this. Normal printing today, and certainly in the 1950s and 60s, was using the dot system. So the first order of business is very simple. If you're in the antiques and collectible business, you ought to own a 10-power loop. And so what you want to do is you want to put a loop on this thing, and you want to see if the colors break down into dots. Well, if the colors break down into dots, then for sure, it's not a lithograph, it's a printed process. Now, people always say, how do you know so much? And I always tell people in this game, you got to live long enough. And back in the 1950s and 60s, there was a kind of popularization of art, and all kinds of things were done. But one of the things that was done is Miro and other artists did prints for the masses, even lithographs for the masses. And they were sent out and sold for anywhere from 50 to a couple $100. Salvador Dali did some too. They were often so-called artist sign prints. And what happened with Dali, he just sold his name. He'd sign blank sheets of paper. So did Picasso. And they did this. So the question is, what does he have here? Well, one of the things is that in doing some research work on this particular print, I found that you could still buy examples of it today. You could still buy examples of it today for under 30 bucks. Okay, so the question becomes, well, what about, okay, so those are inexpensive reprints, but the question is, what about the original piece? Was it ever done for that type of purpose? Well, the other the next thing you do is you go up on the internet and you find the big expensive Miro prints that were done in very limited quantities, and you look at the paper size. And you want to compare that paper size against this paper size. And usually what you're going to find out, I'm sure she's going to find this out too, is that the paper sizes don't match. I think this print that this Miro object that she has is in fact from the 50s or 60s and part of that mass production kind of thing out there. Now, if in fact it's faded, which she says it is, what does it do to value? It destroys the value almost entirely. At this point, here's the situation as best as I can tell her, because again, I can't see this except through the pictures. Although I do want to thank this person for sending in a whole score of pictures. I mean, she really did us in. But if it's faded, and it looks faded to me compared to some of the other ones that I saw too. And it also looks like there may be some other back damage from the back from may have been framed in a non-acidic mat board or something, or non-acidic backing, or excuse me, framed in an acidic backing like cardboard or something that leached into the paper. Its value shot. Its value now is only decorative and fun, at which point, I mean, if that's what it indeed she has, she's looking at no more than $25, $35. On the other hand, if it would be a clean print, a lot of those prints took a real beating at auction in the 80s and 90s. And everybody says eBay is so bad for the trade. Well, eBay started putting some of this stuff up on eBay. And up on eBay, some of these prints are now in the high teens, low hundreds of dollars. So I think what she has to do is clean it up as best she can, put it back in the frame, and try to make an honest profit above what she paid for it, but not push it. It's not $1,000 piece. I don't think it's a $500 piece. I think maybe 50 to 75 bucks would sell it quickly. Over $100, it's a challenge as far as I'm concerned. Well, we want to thank this
Emily,
one of our WorthPoint subscribers down in Scott, Louisiana.
Yeah, Emily is actually, she said she'd be watching today.
Well, that's good. And, you know, again, check that thing with a loop, get a look at the paper size. My problem is that I couldn't find anything at the high end of the market that even closely resembled it, but I found many, many, many examples when I looked for the inexpensive print stuff. So I think that's what she has. All right?
All right.
Well, speaking of things going on in the trade, we're going to go back to another story that fascinates me, actually, in that one. Collector's Journal, which is out of the Midwest, is a paper that comes across my desk, and it has a lead story on its April 26th edition on the Heckler Antique Glass Auction. Now, Heckler is one of those people who specializes in antique glass, and has for years. I know him, and I've interviewed him several times on my radio show. What You Got? Fascinating fellow, does wonderful catalogs based up in Woodstock, Connecticut. Now, they sell these 19th century historical flasks and other bottles, and he had a sale, and in this particular sale, he netted close to $500,000. But what's interesting about the sale is this: there was let's see here, get the number of items here. I think there were only about 180 bottles or so in the sale, but the top bottle was a Masonic bottle, historical flask. It sold for $56,000. A scarce firecracker print historical flask with a bust of Washington sold for $49,000. Another pine burst flask made by Keene in Keene, New Hampshire, sold for $24,500, and a brilliant sapphire historical flask of Washington and a sailing frigate sold for $18,700. Now, what happens is if you add up all those numbers, that's $150,000. So if you have a $500,000 sale and 4 pieces are worth $150,000, you know, that means the balance of the pieces were worth $350,000, nothing to sneeze about. But at the same time, it demonstrates that oftentimes in a collection, that somewhere between 25 and 40% or 50% of a collection rest within the top 10% of the items in the collection. And this is something that a lot of people, you know, when I'm asked to go out there and dispose of a collection or try to deal with a collection, the truth of the matter is that you have to look at the collection first as a whole, and then you have to identify the top percent. I tell people to think of a collection or any category of collecting as a pyramid. Because if you do a pyramid, you know, you have a point at the top, right, and it comes down, and then there's a square across the bottom, right? You with me, right?
I'm with you, yeah.
Well, if you draw a line halfway across the pyramid, you know, this is the imaginary pyramid. I mean, I can't do it with, right like that. Now, how does that look? Some kind of strange Masonic symbol. But if you draw your fingers over there, you don't divide the pyramid in half, and that's the important thing. 2/3 or more of the square of the space of the pyramid is below the middle line. All right. And this is a way to think a lot about collecting categories and levels of collecting. Now, when we talk about what's collectible in any category in terms of surviving things, you ready for this? All the stuff below that bottom half of the line, we call that junk, landfill stuff. It's the stuff above there that's worth collecting. And so that line starts at about fair. And then as you draw smaller and smaller lines across there to the top, eventually you get the divisions, you know, the 10 grades from poor all the way up through near mint. But the point is that at the top of the triangle, at the very tippy top, is about 10 or 15 items we call the masterpiece or ultimate units of the collecting, and about one small line underneath there, that space is called the upper echelon pieces in a collection. And those are the ones that often defy value drops. The collection, when you're trying to determine the value of a collecting category and its strength, you have to look at the middle, the stuff right above the half line. And if that's going strong, then everything is great. But if only the top is strong and the bottom is weak, and that's true in many collecting categories today, you've got real problems in that collecting category. And so what happens with people like Heckler and his glass auctions and Michael Strausser, for example, with the Magellic auctions, what makes them so much fun is they're selling the top, the upper echelon, the masterpiece units, and the above average stuff. And so these are great ways to track markets. But same way with Rago. Rago's many sales out of Lambertville, New Jersey. And this is where you have to interpret this. But anyway, it's fun for me to see it. I still wonder who's buying this stuff, because I can't believe it's young collectors buying this. I think these are still the old timers. We're at a very interesting point, Greg, in the marketplace right now, where many of these old categories like carnival glass, historical flask and bottles, there's still a small cadre of older collectors that are keeping the market propped at the top end. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe not. And we've seen markets collapse when the top end collapse, when the collectors all start to sell out. So it's fun again to look at this type of stuff. I mean, I give Marv Heckler a great deal of credit for all the work. And you know, you and I have talked about hidden giants and forces in this trade. Heckler represents one of those specialized auctioneers that grew up that came to the marketplace in the 60s and 70s and took one special category and auctioned it, like Michael Strausser does at Magellic. I mentioned his name earlier.
Right.
But now here's the problem with Mr. Heckler and Mr. Strausser. They're not getting young either. And so how much longer will they go? Maybe not longer. And when they drop out of the marketplace, then who's going to be around to support that category? What market sources? There was a wonderful example of that in American Historical Staffordshire. Dave Arman and Mike Carreau and a few others virtually made that market. When Arman died, he was a principal auctioneer of that stuff. When Arman died, market just collapsed. I mean, it's still around. You see a lot of it. Just saw a whole block of it go off down at Pook and Pook, and you see off of some of it go off in Skinner. But it's not the same thing. You don't have that one person pushing and pushing and pushing. And so it gets down to a price point where it does interest the heritage galleries and Sotheby's and Christie's. And man, when it's not visible, in fact, I forget what this is. Don't get old. But I just remember I wanted to do I'm going to do a Rinker column shortly on out of sight, out of mind. Oh, I know, it was the Hager thing. What I want to do a column about what happens when 30 or 40 years pass and it's out of people's minds. What does it mean to collecting it? A lot, actually. Well, I don't want to miss our second object because, boy, it's a neat, you know, there are times I look at things and I say, I don't care what this is worth. I want to own one of these things just because they're neat. And we got a wonderful letter in from one of the members of our WorthPoint community. He didn't identify where he's from Union, New Jersey. Paul sent us a picture of an aerial camera he acquired. Now, there are two things there's one thing I wish people would do, and that is I wish they would, when they send my inquiries in to tell me about all this, you know what they never tell me, Greg? What they paid for it.
That's right. That's right.
And I'd like them to do that. I mean, they want me to, I think the whole goal is what they want me to do is they want me to tell them they paid more, value it for more than they paid so they feel good, okay? But,
right, they want the validation of their great pick.
That's right. Now, here is, and again, I want to thank Paul. Paul, I really appreciate the fact that you sent in a wide variety of pictures. Now, for some reason, I don't have that picture. I don't know why. But
You don't have this one?
That solves one of my problems, questions I had. There must have been another email that either you didn't forward me, I don't have. But anyway, enough of that. Here is the camera. And one of the things that Greg and I were talking about before we went up on the air about this was, is this a military camera or not a military camera? Now that I see this picture, there's no question it's military. Look at the DAB, Army.
Here's the other crate picture.
What's that?
I said, here's the other crate picture. And I'm sorry I didn't get these to you. I thought.
All right. Yeah. No, but this is definitely a military box. Okay. And the question now becomes, what camera is it, and how old is it? Now, he did that. You know, I give Paul a lot of credit. He did some research work on this camera too, and he had a picture of a plane, a bi-wing plane. There you go. With the camera intact. And the question is, are we looking at World War I, or are we looking maybe in a period between World War I and World War II and whatever? This camera is by Kodak, Eastman Kodak Camera Company, and it has a Hawkeye aerial f4.5, 254 millimeter 4x5 serial number 54 lens on it. The question is, my instinct tells me that as much as I would like it to be from World War I think it's from the period after war. Remember that most of the planes, like the Lafayette Escadrille and so forth, and our flyers were flying in World War I, were planes that were French, not American. Okay, we sent our forces over, but I don't remember. But now I really got to do some homework. But I don't remember as many American airplanes going over there in World War I. In there, they were mostly British and French-made planes. And so my feeling is that, and I did find work, and there were British aerial cameras and other aerial cameras at the time. My feeling is that this is from the 20s, maybe late teens, early 20s, but somewhere in that period of time. Oh, oh my gosh, what is that? I didn't get that one either.
Yeah, this one either.
More stuff that I do, buddy.
I believe that the camera is here on the table.
Yeah, I see that.
The camera here, but I like the fact that this man here has got a machine gun in his lap.
Yeah, and I think those uniforms to me look a little bit later than World War I. I don't know why I should think that. I'm sure we'll probably hear all kinds of nasty things from our viewers who say, "What do you mean those aren't World War I? That's such and such a unit." But anyway, okay. Here's the issue. I think it's a Kodak A series camera. Okay, that I do. There was a K series camera made out by Fairchild, but this is what I think is. Now the question becomes, what is it worth, and who would buy it? Well, there were no secondary prices anywhere on the marketplace for this, unless you found some. Did you find some?
Well, I found similar things. Here's a German World War I aerial camera.
All right.
Sold for $1,000.
Yeah.
I didn't sign in.
No, that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. We'll take your word for that. Did you find any other cameras? You know, we know.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me back it up here.
All right.
So that was okay. for $9.99, right?
All right. Yeah.
And then farther down, there was a Japanese. Well, let's see. No, this is
not a World War I camera.
No, not World War One. Here's a Linhof that's sort of similar.
Yeah, I found a bunch of World War II cameras out there. All right, so here's the name of the game. All right, we're going to play Harry Rinker's evaluation method on this one, right?
Okay.
First of all, it's a neat camera. The second thing is you have to ask how many people are collecting aerial cameras. Now, the answer is it's a museum piece. I'm going to tell you that right up front. I usually don't get too excited about museum pieces, but this is a camera with that fact that he has the box and all the parts and supporting photographs. My own feeling is that this is a very valuable camera to the right people. Now, who are the right people? Well, you know, value depends on the buyer. And one buyer you have is a World War I or 1920s, or these guys that do military reenactments from World War I in a later period. They would be a big market, especially if they're aerial reenactors. All right, that'd be the first order of business. The second order of business is, what about a camera collector? I think it's more of a curiosity to a camera collector than is it. But then you have all the flight museums. You know, there's a big one in Dayton, Ohio. They're out at the Wright Field, and I think it would attract a lot of museums. In fact, when we did some research work on aerial cameras, the one I keep coming across was a naval World War I camera in the Smithsonian collection. So here we go. How do we value this? Well, until it goes on the market, it's a crapshoot. Now, I'd be interested, again, as I said, to know what Paul paid for it. But here's my feeling. If you were trying to sell this camera, right, $1,500 would sell it quickly. $2,500 would probably sell it. $3,500, it may sell if you work your butt off. $5,000 it may not bring. Okay? So the question is, if you're a dealer, you take what you paid for it, and if you can turn it real quick, you'd be smart. But my feeling is that I think Paul wants to know what the max market is. And the answer is he's not going to find out unless he throws it on the market. And then the question becomes, where do you sell it? Well, the answer, you ready for this one, is not in the United States.
Really? So you want to go to France with it?
No, I want to go to Germany with it.
Germany, okay.
Because in Cologne, Germany is Auction Team Becker, B-E-C-K-E-R. First of all, while we have a lot of American camera collectors, the Europeans love scientific instruments and love cameras. The major typewriter collectors, business collectors, scientific instrument collectors are all centered in Europe. And the one, you know how we were talking about specialized auction houses for glass and
yes.
for the Majolica?
Right.
Well, there is a specialized auction house which has a branch in the U.S., has people in the U.S. that work for them. Action Team Becker, B-E-C-K-E-R, out of Cologne, Germany. In fact, I was near Cologne, and if I would have had the time, I would have run over to see Uwe Becker again, because I like talking to him. Now, I like just touring his place. He has quite a collection of himself personally of scientific equipment. But I would send it over there, because that's the one place where collectors of this type of thing from all over the world go for auction. And so, and I don't know what it would bring there. I would suspect well above the 5 that I talked about. Really.
Really. If he were to take it to Germany, he'd have a better or more motivated buying public out there because of the collector trade.
The question becomes, how do you reach the maximum audience for any one thing, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, you've got to get it to the right selling source. And in this case, here's a guy in Cologne, Germany, who knows the top collectors across the world for this type of stuff. Why wouldn't you want to sell it through him if you were going to sell it? The good news is he has a location in PA in America where you can deal with the person from America, and then they can arrange to ship it to Germany and get it sold there. I mean, I think Uwe Becker would be thrilled to sell this one, really. At Action, it's called Action Team Cologne, Koln, but you can look it up on the net. All right. So anyway, Paul, if you're listening to this, do me a favor, and Greg, I want you to send me those other pictures, you little stinker here. You didn't do that.
I certainly will. I thought that you had
one email. There was 2 emails, and I didn't get the second one. But no, those second ones are very helpful. I think he's fabulous. He has a case for it and everything.
Yeah, it's a really nice piece.
It's a great piece. It's an absolutely great piece, and well worth spending more time researching it. Now, speaking of researching it, there is one place in the U.S. where he could probably get some data. There is a price guide to cameras by McKeown, McKeown. That is the primary price guide to cameras. The guy had a camera shop up in either Michigan or Wisconsin or somewhere. Again, and his book, which is not a cheap reference book, but his book is the #1. Now, if you went to the WorthPoint library you have down there, you'd find it on the shelf. And this is one of those things where sometimes Harry is not thrilled he doesn't have his reference library anymore, because he could have walked in the other room and got the book down. But the point of the matter is that I'll be down there and visiting with it in July, I think.
Good.
So life is good. Well, we went a little longer this time, but it was all right. We had a lot of fun stuff talking about this.
Yeah, this is good stuff, and it's good to have viewers send in their items.
Yeah, let's kind of end by going through 2 things. First of all, let's encourage our viewers to send in questions they have about antiques and collectibles. And again, I want to thank Paul from Union, New Jersey, and Emily from Scott, Louisiana. Not only did they send in their questions, but they provided enormous numbers of pictures and fun for us to work with. And you can just do it by sending it to community@worthpoint.com. Greg normally forwards all the pictures to me, but he will in the future. I know he will. And we would love to, we have other things we can do, but it's always fun to do them from our WorthPoint subscribers. So that's the first thing. The other thing I do want to do is mention to you also that WorthPoint is one of our affiliate sponsors for the Institute for the Study of Antiques and Collectibles. This is a chance for you to go to summer camp. It's 6 days, 3 2-day courses. The first 2-day course is called Researching Antiques and Collectibles. It's talking about what I just talked about. If you have to research cameras, what's the best book? If you have to research this. And it's also focusing on how do you even identify what you have? Where do you go? What are the best websites? What are the best reference books? What's the correct checklist to go through that? Then we're doing a 2-day course on painting, watercolors, and prints. And it's going to be a real thing. And, we're not going to deal with $1 million stuff. We're going to deal with $100 and $500 and $2,500 stuff. And it'll be great for all the people that encounter that. And finally, the last 2 days are toys, games, and puzzles. Don't come to that one. I can teach that. I'll just play with them all myself. No, actually, we're doing very well. The courses are limited to 30 people, and we are about halfway full in most of the courses at this point. So if you're going to think about coming, do it soon.
Yeah, and I can definitely say that Harry's classes are worth attending. I went last year to the summer camp and came away with more knowledge than I could retain at one time. So I've got your folders and your outlines, and whenever I'm got a question about furniture types or ephemera or whatever, I go back to those folders and get a quick refresher on what you taught us.
Yeah, maybe we should take one final question here at the end, and that is anything new at WorthPoint we didn't know about?
We did a infusion of data to the Worthopedia recently. It was 16 million pieces and it was from several of our top auction house partners, Heritage and Cowan's and Rago, Pook and Pook, places like that, Garth's, and then the rest was eBay stuff, and the eBay stuff is mostly the collectibles thing, which is everything from 50s era walking robots to sports cards and everything in between. So the Worthopedia is now up to more than 320 million pieces of sales data. So we're growing by leaps and bounds every couple of weeks.
Well, you know, one of the things we'll do in a future show is talk about how to do research work on a WorthPoint to narrow down the search so that you find out the objects that you want quickly.
Yes, I think that'd be a great idea. That if we get an item from one of our viewers, we can just go step by step on looking at the pictures and trying to figure out which keywords we want to search for, and then put it into the Worthopedia. Whether it's by using the keywords to match by image, or by using maker's marks or shop marks or whatever we might find in the marks library.
Well, we might be able to send you a few pictures of that. But again, it's been a great day. I guess if I miss a week, I chat longer. I don't know what to tell you there, my friend. But
well,
anyway, we hope
I don't think anybody's complaining.
At this same time, this same place, right?
Right, that's right. We'll be here next Tuesday.
Somewhere around 2 o'clock. We may be a minute or two early. We may be a minute or two late, but we'll be there. And we usually try to end in a half an hour. We've gone a little longer today, but we covered a lot of great ground today, I think.
We had some really good stuff. All right. So until next week, Harry, we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, be well, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.